Picture this, it's 1898. You walk into a pharmacy, a persistent, rattling cough shaking your whole body. Your baby is wailing, struggling to breathe through their own coughing fits. You're desperate. You ask the pharmacist for the safest, most effective medicine he has. Without hesitation, he reaches for a small bottle and hands it to you. On the label, in bold letters, it says, Heroin. Yes, that heroin. He assures you it's a non-addictive miracle cure, perfectly safe for children. This sounds like a scene from a nightmare, but for over a decade it was reality. Before it became one of the most destructive street drugs in history, heroin was a trademarked medicine, mass-produced and marketed by one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. How on earth did this happen? To understand, we need to go back to the 19th century. A time haunted by a relentless killer, tuberculosis. In an era before antibiotics, diseases like TB and pneumonia were rampant and often fatal. A cough wasn't just an annoyance, it was a potential death sentence. The constant, violent coughing exhausted patients, prevented them from sleeping, and often led to fatal hemorrhages. Doctors were in a desperate race to find a solution. They had one powerful tool in their arsenal, morphine. Morphine was incredibly effective at suppressing coughs and relieving pain, but it came with a terrible price. It was highly addictive. The medical community was acutely aware of this. They saw patients spiral into dependency, their lives ruined by the very substance meant to heal them. They needed an alternative, something with all the power of morphine, but none of the danger. This brings us to the Bayer Company in Germany, a name you probably associate with aspirin. In the late 1890s, Bayer was a powerhouse of chemical innovation. They tasked their top chemists with a crucial mission: find a way to modify morphine to make it less addictive. One of those chemists, Felix Hoffmann, the same man credited with synthesizing aspirin, went to work. He took morphine and treated it with a chemical called acetic anhydride, a process known as acetylation. The result was a new compound, diacetylmorphine. The initial tests were astonishing. When the new substance was given to factory workers at Bayer, they reported feeling powerful, energetic, even heroic. And so, a brand name was born. Bayer called their new wonder drug Heroin. Bayer launched a massive global marketing campaign. They advertised heroin as a sedative for coughs, 10 times more effective than codeine but with minimal side effects. They claimed it was a non-addictive substitute for morphine. Brochures were sent to thousands of doctors, detailing its miraculous properties. It was sold in various forms, as a liquid syrup, in tablets, and even mixed with glycerin pastilles. The medical community embraced it with open arms. Doctors prescribed it for everything from the common cold and asthma to tuberculosis and pneumonia. It worked like a charm. A patient hacking their lungs out would take a small dose, and within minutes, the coughing would stop completely. It was hailed as a breakthrough, but the marketing went even further. In a twist of cruel irony, Bayer even promoted heroin as a cure for morphine addiction. The idea was to wean morphine addicts onto this new, safer drug. Of course, we now know that heroin is about twice as potent as morphine and even more addictive. They weren't curing addiction. They were just swapping it for a much stronger one. The public loved it, especially mothers. Imagine having a sick child, coughing all night, unable to rest. A few drops of heroin syrup and the child would fall silent, drifting into a deep, peaceful sleep. It seemed like a godsend. What they didn't realize was that heroin didn't just stop the cough. It powerfully depressed the central nervous system, including the part of the brain that controls breathing. That peaceful sleep was often a dangerously stuporous state, perilously close to a coma. Children were especially vulnerable to respiratory failure. Soon, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Doctors started noticing that their patients weren't just getting better, they were getting dependent. Patients who had recovered from their coughs kept coming back, begging for more of the miracle syrup. Reports started trickling in from cities around the world about a new kind of addiction. People weren't just taking cough medicine, they were craving it. Pharmacists saw customers return day after day, their demand growing. They were selling their furniture, their belongings, anything to get another bottle. A new social phenomenon was taking shape, the accidental addict. These were ordinary people, housewives, laborers, clerks who had been prescribed a legal over-the-counter medicine and had become hopelessly hooked. For more than a decade, Bayer vehemently defended its product. They dismissed the growing chorus of concern, arguing that any addiction was the result of misuse, not a flaw in the drug itself. They continued to profit handsomely from their heroic medicine. But the evidence became impossible to ignore. Hospitals began to see a flood of patients suffering from heroin addiction. The problem was particularly severe in the United States, where the drug was sold freely without a prescription. Newspapers started running sensational stories about cough syrup fiends. The dream of a safe, non-addictive miracle cure had turned into a public health nightmare. By 1913, the truth was undeniable. The safe alternative to morphine had proven to be one of the most addictive and dangerous substances ever created. Faced with overwhelming evidence and public outcry, Bayer quietly stopped producing heroin. A year later, in 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act was passed in the United States, which began the long process of regulating and eventually criminalizing drugs like heroin, morphine, and cocaine. But the damage was already done. Bayer had unleashed a monster into the world. The brand name, Heroin, became so infamous that it was eventually abandoned, but the chemical itself found a new, illicit life on the streets. The networks of addiction that had been created by the legal patent medicine industry laid the groundwork for the illegal drug trade that would follow. It's a sobering story. The company that gave us aspirin, a staple in medicine cabinets worldwide, also gave us heroin. And while Bayer has long since moved on, the dusty old bottles of Bayer's heroin that sit in museums and private collections serve as a chilling reminder. They tell a story about corporate ambition, scientific hubris, and the desperate search for cures. It shows how a substance can be hailed as a savior one day and condemned as a villain the next. It proves that sometimes the line between medicine and poison is simply a matter of time and understanding. Thank you for watching. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time.